I'm just watching the stream.
Hey guys, welcome to our second lecture in the SCHS SNHS lecture series. Today we have two of our own officers, Adam Nguyen and Brady Patton, presenting the COVID-19 vaccine. I think they have some words for you guys before they start.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't already, if you're an SNHS member, do be sure to type your ID number in chat so that way we can give you your points for attending here today. And of course, this is a school-sanctioned event. Please be safe and respectful to everyone in chat as well. And we're going to go ahead and get started today, I think. Or no, we'll wait a few more minutes. Let's give everyone a chance to get in here, just in case anybody's straggling along. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day today. It's a little chilly outside, right? And I think Brady might be having some mic problems too, so I'm gonna. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be presenting on the COVID-19 vaccine. My name is Adam Nguyen, and I'm joined here today with
Brady Patton.
Yes, and the goal of this presentation is to give everyone an overview of what's currently going on, right? Because we know you guys have heard a lot in the news about this potential vaccine that's coming, and there's a lot of hyperbole in the news, right? Because they want to hype everything up. And so what we're trying to do here is trying to explain, first of all, like what a vaccine is, how it works, and then the different methods of development for a vaccine. Because there's hundreds of companies, hundreds of organizations around the world, all rushing to develop a vaccine, and they're trying different methods. Because they're all trying to see which way is the most effective way to develop some sort of immunity to this disease right here. And so we're going to be taking a look at that, especially from a scientific standpoint, and then we'll look at the vaccine distribution process itself. And the goal of this presentation is not in any way to be political. It's to take a look at this from an objective lens and see what's going on, and hopefully help all of you guys better understand what's currently going on as well. So just like to start with a little disclaimer right here. Obviously, COVID-19 is a very rapidly changing circumstance. The information here that we're talking about is correct to the best of our knowledge and our ability as of right now. However, things always change. Please be sure to do your own research and your own due diligence before making any decisions based on what we tell you today. And in addition, me and Brady, neither of us are licensed medical professionals or legal advisors. Please consult your doctor before getting a COVID vaccine or opting not to get one. And this presentation should not be considered legal or medical advice of any sort. All right, so just a nice disclaimer right there. Let's go ahead and get started.
All right, so the Oxford Dictionary defines the vaccine as a substance used to stimulate the production of antibodies and provide immunity against one or several diseases. A vaccine has two major ways to slow the spread of a disease, one as an individual and one as a group method. They're tied together. So individually is pretty simple. You're immune to the disease. You can't catch the disease because you're immune to it. Adam will go into the antibodies and how those work in a second with this presentation. Basically, all you need to know for right now is your antibodies will catch the disease and eliminate them through that. Group-wise is related to how you're immune to it individually. If you individually are immune to it, you can't spread it from group to group. For example, let's say you take a COVID vaccine and one of your friends get COVID. Obviously, if you didn't have the vaccine, you could catch it from them and then spread it to your family members. But now that you are vaccinated and immune to it, you provide a bulwark almost, in that the vaccine will not spread from one group to another or from your friends to your family that way. And so this way, the vaccine or the disease, such as COVID, doesn't have as many avenues or paths to infect people, thereby eliminating the amount of people that are infected by it.
So let's go ahead and take a look at what happens in your body whenever this is a basic overview of your immune system. We're going to skip over a lot of the more complicated things simply because we don't have time to get into it, and you could take like you can have a whole college major over how the immune system works. There's a lot of content to cover, but we're going to give a nice basic overview of how it works. So the first thing that happens is that some sort of bacteria or virus enters your body. Something is trying to attack your body. A foreign pathogen comes in. And what happens is your body's like, oh no, this thing is harming our body, and so your body has antibodies which will cling to the outside of the bacteria or virus and essentially mark it as harmful. And after that, your immune cells, like your killer T cells, will go in and they will They will destroy the bacteria and virus. Right? So it's pretty simple. The important thing here is that the antibodies are marking the bacteria and virus that needs to be destroyed. So they're saying, hey, that's bad right there, get rid of it. They cling onto it, and then your killer T cells will destroy them, often by like swallowing them completely. And so these antibodies right here are really special in that they cling to the outside of a pathogen, such as measles right here. And you may notice the important thing to see is that antibodies have a specific shape and pathogens have a specific shape on the outside of them. So this is representing on the outside of the cell membrane, or on the outside of the membrane in general, there are spike proteins, where proteins embedded in the membrane. And these antibodies can come along and say, hey, look at that spike protein. That looks like it's measles, and they will cling onto it. Or that looks like it's the flu or any other type of pathogen. But each pathogen has a unique set of spike proteins. They're all distinct in their appearance. And so antibodies can only cling to a particular type of disease. So your measles antibodies can't work, they don't work with your chickenpox pathogen, right? So if chickenpox comes into your body, your measles antibodies don't do any good at all. And so you need new antibodies for every type of pathogen that enters your body. And so this is also why whenever you have like chickenpox as a kid, you develop an immunity to it because your body has antibodies already built in. And so whenever you get infected with chickenpox, your body's like, oh, that's chickenpox, let's get rid of it, and it's over. Versus the first time you get infected, where your body says, what is this? I wonder what it does. And it starts harming you, and it's like, oh, we need to get rid of it. Then it takes that time to develop the antibody, and then it goes through the whole immune system response. There are also diseases like the flu, which mutate very rapidly, and as a result, your old antibodies may not work as well on newer strands of flu, and so you have to constantly get a new vaccine shot for it. That way, you can develop new antibodies. Otherwise, you have a chance of getting sick every year. But here's the problem that we are facing with COVID, is that COVID is a new pathogen. COVID is something that we have never seen before at all. And so your body, most of us don't have any sort of resistance to COVID at all. We don't have any antibodies to COVID. So we'll get sick from COVID, and COVID will wreak havoc on our body. And our body's okay, let's develop some antibodies. And it takes that time to develop antibodies in order to fight COVID. What we want to do with a vaccine is we want to train these antibodies to exist beforehand. That's exactly what a vaccine does. It allows us to make this antibody here that will combat COVID before we get hit with COVID, and that way our body can more easily respond when we get infected. And so typically, like Brady mentioned, these vaccines are made up of a weakened version of the pathogen with a similar structure. They're essentially training your immune system to practice fighting the disease. So they're like, imagine like a little like dummy like that you can punch to train like punching people and stuff like that. And so this is very different from antibiotics that you might take whenever you get sick. Antibiotics directly combat bacteria and viruses that are in your body, versus the vaccine, which trains your body to react to the disease. This way your body can more effectively fight the disease throughout your life. Something to note with vaccines, though, is that because they're training your body to fight the disease, they often take a few weeks to develop resistance. So if you get a flu shot, you have to wait a few weeks before your body actually becomes like immune to the strands of flu that are in the flu shot.
There are 4 major phases in the clinical trials or the manufacturing and researching of the drugs that will eventually become the vaccine. The first stage or phase of the clinical trial is called the preclinical phase. This is basically to test the safety of the vaccine or the drug and make sure that it will not interact with your immune system in a harmful way, such that it interacts and the person who takes it starts getting hives. Then it would not be safe for the immune system, and then that would have to go back to the lab to be redone. It's tested through animal testing and cell culture creation, and so this way they can see the effects without having to actually test it on humans yet. And the first time it's used on humans is phase 1, in which the vaccine trials of a groups of people around age 20 to 80. They're very small, about a dozen or so, and there's multiple different groups or called cohorts. And these cohorts these cohorts a small amount of dosage. And then each time they increase the amount of dosage of the drug in the vaccine. And so this way, they can start testing what's the correct dosage to use. Is it a small amount of the drug in the vaccine? Is it a large amount, or is it a small or a medium amount? And this way they can narrow it down to phase 2. Phase 2, they increase the amount of people, as you can see here, and they also minimize or lower the number of dosages that they are going to test. In the vaccines, the groups of people are numbering in the hundreds this time in the cohorts. They are still in hospitals, like in phase 1. They are in hospitals in not isolation wards, but they're not really living a normal life. They're resting in bed. They have everything served to them in a way. They're just there as if they're a hospital patient, which obviously isn't regular life for the majority of people in the world. And so once a vaccine or drug passes phase 2, which only 25% to 30% of drugs do, they go to phase 3. Now, phase 3 is typically going to be okay, we know that this drug or vaccine is going to most likely work. Now let's just make sure that it does in a real life scenario. So in up to tens of thousands of people, with the dosage that they're going to use, they give them basically the almost completed vaccine and have them live their regular lives with just regular checkups. They'll go to their houses or they'll come to them, and they just kind of tell them, okay, how are you doing? Or is the vaccine harming you? Are you immune to the disease? And so phase 3, this way they can get the final numbers. It's in the real life scenario, and they can finally begin marketing the vaccine, which is the optional stage for the marketing. However, Adam and I decided not to include it because there will be no stage 4 for COVID, because everyone already knows about these vaccines. It's not going to show up on your TV one day as an advertisement. Everyone will know about it. Most people will go and get it. And so in stage 4 or phase 4 will not exist. There are 4 main types of COVID vaccines that we will be talking about that are in the making. There's genetic vaccines, viral vector vaccines, inactivated vaccines, and protein-based vaccines. All of the companies that are mentioned in this, because in our slides we will have a list of companies that are beginning to research the certain types of vaccines, they are all in phase 3 with one exception, which I will explain when we get to it.
It's also worth noting that there's a 5th type of vaccination development, which is reusing old vaccines and slightly modifying them to see if they work for this new pathogen, in this case COVID. Unfortunately, it didn't show very much promise, and so only one company out of hundreds is really pursuing it. So we decided not to include it in our presentation. But the first type of vaccine development we want to talk about are genetic vaccines. So genetic vaccines are vaccines that directly deliver some sort of nucleic acid into your body. So you might remember back from a few slides before, the key thing is to have your antibodies cling to the spike proteins, right? The proteins on the outside of the virus. And so essentially what it's doing is injecting the nucleic acid, the recipe for those spike proteins. So think back to your pre-AP biology class. You might remember that whenever your cell wants to synthesize some sort of protein, the nucleus takes the DNA and then it does some stuff to it, and then out of the nucleus comes the mRNA that goes to the ribosome, and the ribosome synthesizes a new protein. And essentially, this is a similar process, except the mRNA doesn't come from the nucleus; it comes from this vaccine injection. So they're injecting the mRNA into you, and the mRNA then enters the cell, interacts with the ribosome, and the ribosome manufactures spike proteins of the coronavirus. And then these spike proteins in turn invoke an immune response. Right here. And so obviously spike proteins go out, the immune system is like, whoa, spike proteins, let's build antibodies to get rid of them. And so it's practicing your immune system to cling onto those antibodies right there. And the interesting thing about this is that this is the first time a genetic vaccine has been tried on a large scale and is shown to work. Right. So with COVID-19, that is. And it works pretty well according to our current trials, with Moderna indicating a 94.5% effectiveness rate and Pfizer indicating a 94% effectiveness rate in terms of in their phase 3 trials. Now, obviously, there's still some more regulation to go through. There's still more oversight that needs to be done, but genetic vaccines do show promise. And if it works for COVID, they could work for future diseases as well. The next type of vaccine development we want to talk about are viral vector vaccines. And so viral vector vaccines are very similar to genetic vaccines in that they also want to invoke that immune system response to like the spike proteins, which pretty much all vaccines are trying to do one way or another. But what a viral vector vaccine is that you're taking DNA and RNA and you're injecting it into a dud virus that functions as some sort of vector to deliver it into the body. And so remember, viruses are just some sort of classification, but not all viruses are necessarily bad. Not all viruses harm your body. Some viruses are just there existing and they don't really do anything. And so that's what this viral vector vaccine uses. It uses a dud virus and it injects DNA or RNA into the dud virus, which then gets injected into your body. And so those dud viruses are designed to often look like the coronavirus, or they are just synthesized spike proteins themselves. And so they also spread around like coronavirus duds, and they look like coronavirus, but they're duds, right? They're not the actual coronavirus there. And so they can't harm humans, but they can invoke an immune system response. However, because they look like viruses, even though they're not COVID, they look like viruses, they also can evoke normal immune system responses, such as inducing a cold, right, where we have runny nose, you have like light fever and stuff like that. Obviously, much less than what you get from having COVID, but also much more than absolutely nothing. And as a result, they can be slightly less effective. But on the other hand, they're really, really cheap to produce. So you could think about this in terms of this holiday season. Obviously, everyone likes getting packages in the mail, right? A lot of people, the excitement of coming home and seeing an Amazon package or a package from any company, really. And you're like, oh, look at this. What is this? And your mom and dad might be like, oh, no, don't open it yet. It's not Christmas yet. But essentially, there's a joy, this reaction whenever you see a package, right? And so what a viral vector vaccine is that it's trying to induce that same reaction, that same joyful woo thing without actually getting a package. So instead of having like a nice, let's say an Apple package with like a new iPhone inside, it's just a packaging with no iPhone inside. All right, so it's much cheaper to produce and it's much safer, or in that case, much more cost effective than actually having COVID, but it still induces that same woohoo reaction. And the goal with the viral vector vaccines is still induce that same, hey, let's prepare for the disease type of reaction. And so the companies and countries that are looking to make this vaccine, the four big players are CanSino Bio, a Chinese firm, Russia, the Russian medical firm, whose name we did not include on here because it's super long and we don't want to pronounce it, Johnson & Johnson, and AstraZeneca / University of Oxford. For the first two, with the China and Russian firms, China and Russia tend to be very secretive about their medical data as a matter of state policy, and as such, there's no real data on it. Johnson & Johnson is still doing their phase 3 trials, haven't released their data for that yet. AstraZeneca, University of Oxford, you may have heard about a week or two ago, actually I think just a week ago, a few days ago even, where they had some results come out that may have looked promising, but may have not looked promising. Turns out they mixed up some of their trials, systems, and dosages, and so the data is pretty bad. But it could possibly be the solution to the coronavirus pandemic, simply because they're really, really cheap to produce. Right, so you can compare the cost of the genetic vaccines, which the Pfizer vaccine is around $20 wholesale to the U.S. government, and Moderna is $15 wholesale to the U.S. government, compared to the AstraZeneca and University of Oxford vaccine, which is to be sold at under $4 per dosage to the U.S. government. So it's much, much cheaper, but it does come with a few drawbacks.
So protein-based vaccines are vaccines that essentially just deliver these spike proteins into the body. Now, you might be asking, what's a spike protein? A spike protein is basically a protein that it mimics a type of virus perfectly. It has all the shapes of it, it has all the spikes of it. And so when the vaccine injects the spike proteins into the body can produce the antibodies in order to match and hold these spike proteins together. So if the body ever experiences the disease in the real one, then the antibodies can hold on to them as the white blood cells and B cells attack it and destroy it. There's little risk to developing immunity. There's little risk while developing immunity, as the virus itself is not injected. So the small sliver of a chance you get when a vaccine such as an attenuated vaccine, which isn't being used as much for COVID, is the live version, which weakened, but it's still live. So you can still experience some symptoms when getting the vaccine itself. However, with protein-based vaccines, there is no chance of that happening, as you do not actually get the virus, but a protein that mimics the virus. And so you will not experience any of the symptoms. However, because you don't experience any of the symptoms at the beginning when you get injected, doesn't mean there won't be drawbacks later on. Now, the drawbacks are the antibodies will fit onto the spike protein. And so if the wild virus comes, such as COVID, if COVID enters your body after getting a protein-based vaccine based on it, then your antibodies will hold on to the virus, the white blood cells and the B cells will come, destroy those viruses, and you think all's well. Not really. Some of those viruses will make it to their destination, which is your cells. And what they do when they get there is the cells become their host, and they basically hack the DNA of the cell and force it to begin making copies of itself, in which case the cell will eventually fill up with it and burst. Now, regularly, if the body has actually interacted with the disease itself before, such as the attenuated virus, then the T cells of the body will know to search out for this wild virus after it's been identified and destroy the cells that have been infected, the dead cells, they call it. And so these cells are destroyed before the viruses can burst and infect new cells. However, since spike proteins aren't the actual virus, and this is the first time the body is experiencing the real virus for itself, the T cells don't know what to do. So the few viruses that do make it to the cells are able to do their work unhindered and be able to inject the cell with their own DNA or RNA. And then the cells will burst with their new copies, and then the cycle is repeated. Eventually, what will happen is your antibodies will catch it enough, and then there won't be enough viruses to severely impact you, and you've beaten the disease. However, during this, you will experience some symptoms of it. An example of this is actually the cold. If you get a protein-based vaccine for influenza and you actually get the cold itself, influenza, then what will happen is you might get some sniffles, you might get a little fever. However, you're not actually going to get the full effects of it, which is bedridden, hospitalization. You're not going to get that. So it's really just a tit for tat. You can either potentially experience some symptoms at the beginning, or potentially experience some symptoms when you actually get it. However, you still will be immune to it in the sense. The protein-based vaccine is lagging behind other vaccine productions, and that is because it takes a long time to manufacture them. You have to get the spike proteins just right and then manufacture them all, which isn't an easy process. And so it's lagging behind. However, since protein-based vaccines are so successful in immunization of their patients, then many health officials believe that protein-based vaccines will actually be the worldwide vaccine that is used. Genetic vaccines are ahead of everything else. However, many scientists believe that since they are new technology in a way, they won't be as used as traditional ones, such as the protein-based vaccine. So if you move down the list, you can see the companies and the countries that are currently making this vaccine is Novavax, Medicago, and the Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences. Now, if you see down here, you can see North Korea, and you will see the phrase possibly phase 1. Do you remember when I mentioned earlier that all the companies that we've listed are in phase 3 except for one? This is the one exception. And the World Health Community isn't really sure what to do about North Korea. They say that they are in the preclinical phase. However, they refuse to let health officials into their country to see it. And they have asked other countries, such as China, to allow them to test their vaccine and manufacture it in their country, as, and quoted from their official who said this, there are no cases of coronavirus in North Korea. So it is impossible to test the vaccine in North Korea. So we must go to a country with cases. So that is why it is possibly phase 1, as many in the health community don't even know if North Korea even has the beginnings of a vaccine. The next type of vaccine is inactivated vaccines. Inactivated vaccine might be a little bit more of what you've heard of. They are created from the virus, in this case COVID, that have been killed with chemicals. So this vaccine is different from the spike protein or the protein-based one in that it does actually inject the virus into you. However, this virus is dead, it's been killed, and so it's not exactly dangerous because, as you can see down here, the main advantage of this type of vaccine is that there's no possible way for you to experience the symptoms of the disease that you're being vaccinated for. The reason why is that it's dead. It can't affect you in any way. And this is a good reason because this way the antibodies are produced as it can learn and tutor the immune system through the dead vaccines. The white cells and B cells obviously know what to do, and the T cells can learn from the virus in order to attack the infected cells, which the protein base had an issue with. And the inactivated vaccine is hard to implicate on a large scale, and the reason why is that they require booster shots. I'm sure you've heard that term before. Booster shot basically means you have to come in for multiple shots of the same vaccine in order for it to work. Because inactivated vaccines are slow. Because they're dead viruses, your body needs to be exposed to it multiple times. And so, for example, the first shot of the vaccine, of an inactivated vaccine, your body prepares the immune system to be able to become immunized for it. The second vaccine shot and on is what actually immunizes you for the disease. So the problem is, and the logistical problem is, how do you make sure that everyone comes back for multiple booster shots? Because many people aren't going to want to, many people will forget, and how do you keep track of that? Because that's impossible. How are you going to remind Jimmy from down the street to go get his 5th COVID shot, his final one, but he doesn't remember, or he just doesn't feel like, he's like, well, 4 shots is enough. It's not. You need to go for the full thing. And so inactivated vaccines are just really hard to do. However, they do have great hope for it because inactivated vaccines was the biggest vaccine against SARS, which was the last large outbreak of a novel coronavirus, which is the type of disease virus that COVID-19 is. So an activated vaccine has shown success against basically a coronavirus, which isn't COVID-19, but is very similar, the most similar that we can go off of. And so it's a real dilemma for the medical field because you have one that has been proven to work, but at the same time, it's really hard to implement. And so the companies and countries that are currently making this type of vaccine is Sinopharm in China, Sinovac in China, and Bharat Biotech India. So as you can see, the current countries that are making this are countries that are most affected by SARS because they want something that they know will work. China and India were both severely affected by SARS. And if you go back to the more experienced or the newer technologies such as genetic vaccines, Adam, you can see that Moderna and Pfizer are both American and European vaccines, which weren't as affected by SARS as Asian countries. And so they're willing to risk new ways as opposed to old ways that have been proven true. And you can keep going.
There we go. So the final section of our presentation, we want to talk about vaccine distribution. Because at first it seems like a very easy question to ask. Who gets the vaccine first? And you may immediately go, okay, well, obviously health professionals on the front line get vaccines first, right? Because they're the people who are most vulnerable to getting COVID. And then after that, old people get the vaccine first. However, there's a strong argument to be made and it's made by some, that the vaccine, after going to healthcare professionals, should go to young people who are most likely to spread the disease. And the theory behind this is that a lot of old people they're quarantining their houses and they're not likely to catch the disease because they're isolated from the rest of the world, versus young, often reckless people tend to go around and mingle with a lot of people, and vaccinating people who interact with more people on average is a way to prevent the spread of coronavirus throughout a population. And so it's a very difficult question to wait. And each country is sort of taking a different approach. And even in America, each state is taking a different approach as to how to handle it. Right? Because everyone agrees that the first people who should be vaccinated are frontline healthcare workers. But then after that, who does it go to? And eventually, we want everyone to be vaccinated, and that's probably what's going to happen. But for a good few months, and for the good first half of next year, probably, there won't be enough vaccine doses for everybody, and so they have to be rationed, and only certain people can get a vaccine. And so it's the job of a few select individuals to figure out who gets the vaccine first, and that decision has a really big impact on how COVID will do in the next year, right? If we take the best course of action and we vaccinate the right people, then COVID could go away. And if we don't take the good action and we just waste our vaccines on people, then COVID will continue to exist until we eventually vaccinate everybody. And so it's a really big question, and it's one that doesn't really have a definite answer to it. There's also a lot of other circumstances surrounding vaccine distribution. Brady's going to talk about a few of those, especially when it comes to countries ordering vaccines, right?
So you might think, well, all countries probably want to get COVID gone and done with. However, different countries have different ideas. For example, Taiwan is a country that has basically got control of COVID as well. New Zealand. New Zealand's probably more popular one, so I'll go with New Zealand. New Zealand has COVID under control. They have very, very few cases in their country. So their goal is to make the COVID vaccine affordable for all, accessible to all, and the highest quality it can be, so that it doesn't have to be like multiple vaccines, because then their citizens might get tired of it and be like, oh, a third COVID vaccine. Well, I've had the first two, I don't need the third one. Whereas a country as America, which is being completely devastated by COVID currently, they're currently just trying to make the vaccine in general. They're just trying to get something out there in order to mitigate its effects. So they don't really care about the cost as much. As long as it can get out there, it'll eventually go down eventually in cost. The quality needs to be obviously good enough to work, but it doesn't need to be 100% tip of the top, 100%, because they just want to get something out there. And this shows how the different countries will react. And also, in poorer parts of the world, such as the third world, such as interior Africa, these countries might not have the same access to vaccines as we do, such that inactivated vaccines, you need multiple booster shots. How are you going to, in Africa, how are you going to make sure that all those shots get there? And so it's really just hard for each country to work together because they all have different goals and plans. And so each country's COVID vaccine distribution and response is likely to look different in the upcoming months, years, however long it takes for these vaccines to get out there. You're probably going to see a lot of different ways of doing it. And I think it'll be pretty interesting to see how this plays out.
Yes, and so we see that the future with the vaccine is very unpredictable. And it may seem clear, hey, like, Pfizer, Moderna, they have this thing that's about to get approved and it'll be all great. It's all very unpredictable still, and the future is uncertain. But we do want to leave all of y'all who are watching with a little note that while the vaccine is coming, it is still very, very important that we all practice proper public health safety measures, right? And that includes distancing from other people in public, especially when we're inside, wearing our masks whenever we can if we're interacting with other people, and trying to limit social gatherings. Right? It's still very important that we don't jump on the train and be like, oh, it's the vaccine, it's here, because it's not here yet, and it's going to take a while to eventually reach all of us. So we still do have to stay safe together. And with that being said, I'd like to open it up for questions if anyone has any. Right here. It appears there's no questions in chat yet, but if y'all are watching, please do ask questions in chat. Otherwise, we will have a very boring Q&A session. While you guys are all furiously typing up your questions in chat, we'd like to thank the presentation template is from SlidesGo, icons are from Phytocon, infographics from FreePick, images also created by FreePick, and also introduction slides also created by FreePick, and there's some other, all the icons and stuff, all from FreePick.
Just thank FreePick. Just thank
FreePick. And these are the resources we used right here, the primary resource we used for our presentation. And if you're looking to further reading on the COVID-19 status, there's no better place to look than this little box that's next to the YouTube window. This is COVID-19, get the latest information from the CDC, and it's a little learn more button. Some great resources on there as well. I don't think anyone has any questions unless someone's typing out a really long question.
All right. Well, if you have a question and you're still typing it up, just stay a little bit longer and ask it. If not, I think this presentation is over.
Yes. Thank you all very much for coming. It's been a pleasure having you all here. Listen to us ramble on for 40 minutes. I think that's it, right? If you're an SNHS or you haven't typed your ID number in, go ahead and do that right now.
All right. Well, thank you guys for coming, guys. Have a good rest of your evening.
All right. Justin, I think we can end the Zoom now, right?